Hello and welcome back to the penultimate episode of Bigger Thinking Lions Edition, sponsored by Go.Compare.
And we have a series winner, don't we, mate? Lions scored 2-0 up against the Wallabies, and we're going to be digging into it.
We are, Rob. So settle back and enjoy. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment on what you thought of the match.
Well, hell of a game, Biggs. I think that was the game that this series needed, wasn't it? What was it like in the MCG? Obviously, record crowd there. Looked like the Aussies were a bit more vocal. Take me inside the stadium.
It was, I have to say, it was what a Lions series was all about. The atmosphere beforehand felt different. It was almost like that was the biggest stage in rugby union, effectively. Lions series, nearly 100,000 or 90, just over 90,000 people at the biggest stadium in sport. And it almost felt beforehand, you could sense it beforehand that Australia just weren't going to be the same as they were in Brisbane. It almost like that, the MCG, the crowd, the occasion wouldn't allow it. And you sense that from being in the stadium quite early doors. And even like, sometimes I even thought like the Australia team were like 25 minutes late arriving to the game, which you think sometimes would be like a bit of a put off. But I think actually that helped the Aussies in terms of almost just sometimes, like in old school sort of junior rugby, basically get to the ground, boots on, kit on, and you're out and you're playing. No real time to like think about the magnitude.
No time to overthink.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say the atmosphere, the anthem, the pre-game build-up, and it set the game up perfectly that the Aussies started so well. And it was a complete role reversal. If you compare the start in Brisbane to the start in Melbourne at the MCG, I mean, it's as if you're watching a different team, wasn't it? I have to say the atmosphere, Robbie, like when you're commentating and you've got the headphones on, sometimes you get lost in terms of you feel like there's not a huge amount of atmosphere or whatever, but there was times where it was rocking, especially after Australia scored that try straight from the kickoff when they went 23-5 up. You took the headphones off and it was just like nothing you've ever heard before, in fairness, from a sporting spectacle.
And what do you think was the difference? Do you think it was a bit of, I don't know, like national pride, or was it the difference with with bringing in the big guns in terms of Skelton and Valentini? Like what was the difference? Because I mean, Melbourne's not a traditional rugby union stronghold, is it? It's all AFL down there, and
It is. It's literally there was a game on at the MCG 2 days before. Like they had 85,000 people there. Like again, people are like, you're wandering around the streets of Melbourne. People are asking what you're here for and what's going on in town, type of thing. People just don't know. We said this on last week's video, but when I looked at the two teams last week, I couldn't see a way in which that Wallabies 15 gets the job done against the Lions 15 in Brisbane. And I think probably everyone agreed with that. When I saw Valentini's name and I saw Skelton's name on the team sheet, I thought they'd be better and they'd bridge the gap. Did I think two people individually effectively could bridge the gap as much as they did, and probably should have won, shouldn't they, the Wallabies, if we're being brutally honest, in terms of they were probably the better team on the evening. And I think that's where your answer lies. You compare the two teams last week and the two teams and the team this week. So last week's team to this week's team, one had Skelton and Valentini in and one didn't. And if we're looking for a simple answer, and sometimes you overcomplicate things when you analyze things, and those two guys got Australia on the front foot from the absolute get-go. And I have to say, I thought Skelton was brilliant in terms of mixed it up early doors, got into a bit of a scuffle, brought the crowd into play early doors as well. Do you know what I mean? And I have to say, it's tough to say when you've got when you've got Joseph Swiley, when you've got Ikitau, when you've got Tom Wright, when you've got Angus Bailey, your team, but I mean, those two just lifted it. And for me, that was the biggest difference. And if you, like you said, you compare the two teams from Brisbane to Melbourne, two players were in it in Melbourne and two players weren't in it in Brisbane. And you saw the difference in physicality, abrasiveness, confrontational, winning collisions. And I thought in particular, sort of Skelton did a lot of the hard yards and the really sort of tough 1-yarders, 2-yarders here and there. But Valentini was the best player on the park by an absolute mile for that first 40 minutes, wasn't he?
Does that sort of show how simple a game rugby really is? We like to overcomplicate it, don't we? But, if you've got size and you're getting that physical advantage, that really That could sometimes be the difference.
But you know what, Rob? What was our biggest point last week? But yes, the physicality was the biggest point, but the next biggest point was the control and the accuracy and the performances of Gibson Park and Russell, wasn't it? And in terms of how good they were, how world class they were, how everything they touched, it was easy and simple. But that 40 minutes in Brisbane, they were absolutely steamrolling the Aussies with physical dominance. And for the first 40 minutes, or most of the first 40 minutes, or certainly the first 30 minutes, Jake Gordon and Tom Liner enjoyed that. Now, again, I'm not comparing those two and putting them in the same category of classes as Gibson Park and Russell, but they looked like international players a bit more, didn't they? With that go forward, and they looked like they could bring Ikitau and Tom Wright and Jorgensen into the game a bit more. So it just goes to show that I think you're right, that rugby can be, you can look at tactics, you can look at trick plays, all the fancy stuff you can think of, but effectively, if you get go forward, which the Lions had in that first 40 minutes in Brisbane and won the game comfortably, albeit only by 8 points, and you look at what Valentini and Skelton mainly did, I just thought that's ultimately where the game is won and lost. Probably the biggest point in this series has been physicality and dominance in that area.
So I think ultimately winning the game and winning the test 2-0 was the main thing. But if we kind of dig into the game a little bit, did you think defensively the Lions looked a little bit off? Like I could see, Farrell looked quite frustrated in his coaching box at time. I know that's obviously due to the high pressure nature of the game, but
there's no doubt they didn't look as if they were as connected. But again, it was easier for them to be connected last week, or better connected, because they were winning the collisions, and Australia didn't throw a punch last week, did they? Australia were, as like we said, as poor as an Australia team probably as we've seen for a long time. But this week they were the complete opposite. They were throwing shapes at the Lions' defense. They had Swahili, they had Ikitau being direct. You had Jake Gordon sniping around the fringes, keeping the ones and twos and guards honest, and caught Ty Furlong out for his try under the sticks. And all that comes off physical dominance. So when the Aussies and when the Wallabies last week, if you compare the attacking shapes, last week it was easy for the Lions to be connected and to not worry about playing the Tom Wright out the back of that pod of 3 off 10, or Liner being connected off the first pod off 9. They could just come off the line and go and strangle the possession and strangle the ball. This week, everyone was connected from a Wallabies point of view. This week, they brought the centres into the game. They brought the back three into the game by playing to edges, physical dominance by Skelton and Valentini and Parecki and these guys, which then made it a little bit more complicated. And however good a players you are, and you look at the players that probably looked, you just look at the Lions players, you look at Ty Byrne, Tom Curry, Maro Itoje, Bundy Aki. You're just naming few there, and they looked, however good you are, however world-class you are, if a good attack is winning collisions against you and throwing shapes at you, not easy. You know what I mean? It's a difficult position to be in. So that's probably as much credit to the Wallabies as it was the Lions. But I thought the Lions, where they won the game for me, was those 2 scores before halftime, just after 30 minutes. Everyone can talk about Keenan's try, which was just an incredible Lions moment and an amazing Lions memory. They can talk about the James Lowe sort of fend and out the back door pass, etc. All those brilliant moments. But the Lions won the game almost when they scored to narrow that deficit to 6 points at halftime, or 7 points. Because I think if Australia go in at 23-5 up, that game's done, because all the momentum is with them. I think all the team talks are so different. Australia can probably afford to take a couple more risks. Saturday night, the Lions needed entries into the 22. I thought Finn Russell's touch kicking was excellent, was world class. Took a risk, put the Lions in a position, because again, if the kick is 10, 15 meters shorter, the Lions probably don't score one of those opportunities. So I just think that they rolled the sleeves up, and those couple of scores is what, for me, swung the momentum in the game and won the Lions the series.
Do you think that Andy Farrell and his coaching ticket, do you think they got the big calls right? Because thinking back, the only sort of controversy around this tour were around selections. You know, it was Owen Farrell being called up. It was Jac Morgan not getting the starting slot in that first test. And then in test 2, it was, you know, bringing in the big Irish contingent. Do you think they got those calls right, or ultimately did it not really matter because they were going to win regardless because of how much better they were than the Wallabies?
I think there's an element of both, Rob. I do think sometimes it's a results business, especially in a Lions series. It's a results business. And if the result had gone the other way, how the reaction would have been. But ultimately, you have to say that Andy Farrell and his coaching team have been vindicated because they've won the series. Now, no matter how you do it, nobody will care about that. Nobody will be saying in 10, 15, 20, 25 years' time that, oh yeah, but the Wallabies weren't great and, you know, maybe he should have picked this guy or that guy, etc. A little bit like Gats. You compare Gats almost in 2013, probably the biggest Lions selection of all time, you could argue, dropping Brian O'Driscoll for Jonathan Davis.
But now, we are still talking about it. We spoke about it the other week. Yeah.
That's only 12 years' time, though, Rob. It's only 12 years. But do you know what I mean? It's like if that hadn't gone the way of the Lions, then all of a sudden I think there's huge potentially the way that it falls out is very differently. But Gats has been completely vindicated from that, as has Andy Farrell, and ultimately it's a results business. They've won by 3 points and 8 points. Are the Lions better than 11 points over 2 games? As a team, you probably think yes. Certainly in the first test, they were probably 20 points better, 25 points better. But ultimately, Andy Farrell has picked the right people. And you even go back to sort of like the Owen Farrell situation. And I was one who said I didn't understand the timing in terms of, I had no problem with Owen Farrell almost being on tour, almost like picking from the start. If you wanted Owen Farrell in there, no issues from his experience and his CV, etc. But it was almost just the timing of replacing Elliot Daly was the confusing part for me. But then you look at last night, Marcus Smith, whether he failed his HIA or not or whatever, but they had Blair Kinghorn on the bench, which then meant that they needed a 10-12 cover probably. And Owen Farrell fits that bill as good as anybody. So Andy Farrell and his coaching guys would be saying, well, yeah, okay, it probably wasn't like for Elliot Daly and maybe it could have been handled slightly differently, whatever. But now nobody's caring because it was the right decision to have 10-12 cover on the bench. I just think, look, it's all about winning. You have to say that ultimately, has it been before last night? It almost felt like last night was like the Lions moment in Australia, wasn't it? Because up until then it had been, you know, it had been decent, but certainly I think I left the stadium in Suncorp last week thinking, not quite sure a Lions series first test should feel this way. I left the stadium last night the complete opposite. You compare the emotions of last night at the MCG an hour after kickoff compared to Suncorp in Brisbane an hour after final whistle. And you think that's what Lions test matches are about. That's what Lions series are about. The drama, the atmosphere, the jeopardy. You know, that game was back and forth almost all game, wasn't it? In terms of Lions scored a couple, Aussie went out in the lead. And I just think I just couldn't it's just so much in terms of the Wallaby performance, the jeopardy, the intensity, the physicality, everything. You compare the two of them and it's just a different level. And ultimately, you'd have to say that the Lions winning the series or being 2-0 up in the series and winning the series, whichever way you look at it, Andy Farrell is a successful and series-winning coach, and all those players who've the tough selection calls, Bandiaki, Sione, Tuipulotu, Hugh Jones, Ring, all these guys. It's ultimately, you have to say, is the right decision because they've ended up as series winners and deserve all the credit they get.
So obviously Twitter's maybe not the best barometer for this, but there seems to be quite a lot of angry Australian fans around, in particular around sort of two key moments in the game. So first of all with Dan Sheehan's try early over where he sort of looks like he jumps over the tackle and the kind of justification is, well, that you're allowed to dive for a try, but where are you on that one? Because it didn't look right to me.
It didn't look right. And I think the first thing Ronan O'Gara, who was sitting next to me on the right of me, said was, you can't jump over a tackle. And in normal play, you can't to avoid a tackle, but in the act of scoring a try, you are allowed to. So it's like people, jumping over to score in the corner or or whatever. I agree with you. It didn't look right on first watch and probably everyone, but I think Andrea Piardi actually explained the situation really well and almost said, yes, you're not allowed to do that in open play, but going to score a try, you're allowed to. So yeah, I agree. It didn't look right, but you could almost say it's really smart play from the Lions and Dan Sheehan, can't you?
And then the big one, the last try of the game, so the clean out from Jac Morgan. Where do you stand on this? Because there's a couple of bits here. There's the initial contact. I mean, first of all, whether he's gone in straight off his feet, and then you've got to look at where the contact was, because it looks kind of at the back of the neck of Carlo Tizzano, and then you've got the kind of Hollywood dive backwards to draw the attention to it to the officials. Where do you sit with this?
Well, speaking of Man United, he'd have done well at United, Tizzano, wouldn't he? In terms of the way he looks quite a tough fella. Look, working back, I didn't think it was the right play. I think it was probably something that they thought the Lions were on a bit of a steamrolling session at that point, weren't they? In terms of it was probably just like it was somewhere close. I'm not saying it wasn't. It was quite close, wasn't it? In terms of it was something that needed looking at. So, do you flag it by acting like that? I'm not saying I don't agree with that. And I think Sam Warburton in the studio sort of said he didn't like that. And I think that's right. I don't think that's got any part of in the game. Do I think it was a penalty for the head contact foul play? I don't think so. I really don't. For me, it was I thought the clean out was excellent. The one thing you could almost argue is that he's off his feet. That's the one I'd be, if I was the Aussies, I'd be probably focusing a little bit more on that in terms of, sometimes when you see something on a TMO, you almost know in the first instance or the first replay whether it's going to be penalty, yellow card, red card, or nothing, don't you? First time I looked at it, I thought, he's going to be really unlucky to be done for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just think, yeah, I don't think it was foul play. I suppose in the absolute laws of the book, it potentially could be sealing off, but you'd probably see that clean out or that situation 15 times a game, wouldn't you?
This is the problem. If we go back and look at every ruck, just because a try's been scored, we'd never have any tries scored, would we, if we went back and looked at every ruck in the build-up to a try, because you see that so many times.
I have to say, I think it was the right call to look at it. 100% is the right call to look at it. But I think the evidence was relatively clear, and I'm just really pleased that, I was feeling for Jac Morgan at that point, because I thought, the big selection process about does he start, does he get on the bench, only Welshman on tour. I just thought, how cruel would that be if that was sort of, a defining act for him, and I was just over the moon that it wasn't.
Some standout performances then. Tom Curry, test match animal status confirmed, isn't it? There was the questions around him.
That intervention on Swiley at the about 55, 60 minute mark, was it? Where I think Australia were 9 points up. I think if he doesn't intervene there and Australia score, the game's dead and buried. So, his score in the corner, great footwork to come back in, score, power, nuisance, Jacqueline. I think that's the biggest thing. Let's compare his tour matches, 6.5. But when it really counted, when it really mattered, he's up somewhere near a 9, isn't he, for that? So, had a brilliant tour. Probably got a good chance of being up there for sort of man of the series as well, isn't he?
Yeah, and speaking of man of the series, we were chatting last night about Maro Itoje, and you reminded me that he actually got man of the series in 2021, but he seems to have really stepped his game up in that captain's role, and he seems to be quite a different captain in terms of Lions captains previously, where they were really like the focal, the spearhead, they'd be in on all the chat. You've got those great Lions documentaries where you've got Jono giving the big speeches beforehand, and maybe Maro isn't that, but he's led in his own way, and certainly on the field with his performances, he's been the leader that the Lions needed. Yeah,
and he's just gone like, Maro for me is always like, knowing him a little bit, you kind of, really important for Maro, and as a captain you have to be good in your area first, and I think that leads others, that gets others to follow you. And that's what type of captain Marrow is. Like you say, whether you're Paul O'Connell, Alan Wynne, Martin Johnson, they're very much sort of, you don't want to let this guy down, and the speeches and everything that comes with a real, sounds harsh on Marrow, but a real icon in a sense, whereas Marrow feels like almost just this guy who's put in there, and it's like, come and follow me, in a sense, you know what I mean? It doesn't feel like...
He's like an enigma.
Yeah, he feels a bit different to the others, not worse or anywhere near it because of what he's achieved in the game, but just feels a little bit of a different character, doesn't he? And knowing him, I know that he is a different character. Yeah, he's just stepped up. And again, has he been 9 out of 10 in both games? Probably not. He's been really sort of like 7.5, 8 out of 10, and just being there, work rate, discipline's improved massively, hasn't it? In terms of not, I sat down with him in the week and chatted to him, and he said like that's been a big part of his game, especially becoming captain. If you're the captain and you're the one giving 3-4 penalties away a game, then it's very difficult to get the best out of the rest of your team and ask for discipline and ask for accuracy, etc. So yeah, no, he's been excellent. Really been impressed with him. He's just been a nuisance as well, hasn't he? And I think physically on Saturday he was, especially in that second half, really stepped up and drove his team over the line.
And I thought Hugo Keenan was brilliant today. He has been maybe a little bit underwhelming, had a bit of a nightmare in the first test. I know he had that illness where he lost a lot of weight, but certainly stamped his authority over that 15 jersey in the last test.
Yeah, I think, again, similar-ish story to Curry and Byrne in a sense that, and again, a little bit of luck, probably that. I think if Kinghorn is fit for that first test, I think he plays. But you need that sometimes.
Or even Daly.
He's probably been a little bit fortunate that he had a really tough start to the tour in terms of illness, and then he looked way off it against the Waratahs when he came in, didn't he? He looked as if he'd been ill for a few days and a little bit of rust, hadn't played for a while. Couple of injuries, and all of a sudden he's the guy who scores the winning try in the second test to win the series. I mean, it's just mad how sport and stories work out like that, isn't it? In terms of, and I thought his performance in that second test, again, comparing his tour, which again was, pretty underwhelming, from his high standards in terms of the tour matches, the illness, maybe slipping down the pecking order with Elliott, Daly and Blair Kinghorn. But you look at his performance last night, was covered every blade of grass, made the difference, made the extra man, covered space, but ultimately he's going to be remembered now as the guy who scored the winner in the second test to win and to clinch the series. So again, it's almost like, yeah, if you're picking a 15, you probably, if everyone was fit, you probably would have picked Elliott ahead of him. You probably would have picked Blair ahead of him. But his performance in that second test last night to clinch the series with the try was just, I thought it was brilliant. He was solid. And ultimately, like, how many endorsements is he going to be having now off the back of that? His agent's going to be a busy man Monday morning, isn't he? Huh? Just a brilliant story from like I said, from losing 6 or 7 kgs to scoring the winner in the series. Brilliant.
Right, mate, then to finish our Go.Compare Key Decision this week, how does this, and I suppose it's quite a difficult question really, but how does this series win compare to the last line series win in 2013? So I'll ask you that outright, and then I'm going to ask you the more difficult question later on.
Wow, well, I don't know if that's if that's the easier question out of the two of them. All right, so
shoot from the hip, mate. What do you think?
So my Go.Compare Key Decision has to be what series was more impressive as a series win. Is that effectively what we're asking?
That's what. Yeah,
I think from the magnitude of last night, I think had the game gone as it did in the first test, it would have been an easy answer. I just think the magnitude of last night, the MCG, 23-5 down, 18 points down at one point. I just think that is everything. That felt like a little bit like the 09 series, which for me was one of the best series that's been for a long, long time. So I just think that does that maybe just top sort of 2013. 2013 was brilliant, mind, because they had you look at it went down to basically the last kick of the game in the first test, the last kick of the game in the second test, and then obviously that performance in Sydney, which was great. Were Australia a better team in 2013 than they are in 2025? I think the answer is yes. They were ranked number 4 in the world.
Undoubtedly, yeah.
You know, had some brilliant players compared to where they are now. Still got brilliant players, but very much up and down, and perhaps in a transitional period. The drama in the games, Test 1, there was no drama really in terms of that, whereas the drama in 13, Test 1 and Test 2 was huge, and then obviously Test 3, it petered out a little bit towards the end from a Lions point of view, just superb in terms of the running riot a little bit. And I think maybe the not winning a series since 97 in 13, do you know what I mean? Like felt iconic winning. And
yeah,
I think last night felt iconic because of the match, the occasion in Test 2. So what I'm trying to say is I'm really struggling, but I think 13 was like for drama, for where the Aussies were, probably is a bigger achievement. But I just thought last night was one of the best Lions Test matches I've seen in my lifetime. I thought it had everything in it.
I do think it's weird as well how we as Northern Hemisphere fans, like people even talking about, I kind of want Australia to win to make it exciting. Do you think any Springboks fans or any All Blacks fans, do you think they ever say, I hope the Lions win a test to make it interesting? They don't, do we? Like, we're more bothered about the plot than we are about winning almost. Like, we like the storylines.
Yeah, I have to say, like, that Lions test, that Aussie Lions test last night or Saturday night at the MCG, everything it had about it, the physicality, the intensity, the jeopardy, the quality on display. It's probably one of the best Lions test matches for a long, long time. But I think if you look at that 2013 series, the first 2 matches, there was nothing between the 2 teams. So I probably think that just about for a Go.Compare Key Decision, I'd probably just edge that one. But, you know, if the Lions go 3-0 and absolutely blitz the Wallabies in Test 3, then we could be having a different decision. But I think off the face of it right now, I'd probably just go that. But to counter it, that Lions performance and resolve and Test match last night was as good a Test match in terms of quality, jeopardy, as I've seen for a long, long time.
So the difficult question is, mate, we did a combined 2013 and 2025 Lions 15, which we did this before the test match started. If you haven't watched that, you can go back and watch that. That'll be interesting actually now to go back and look on. You picked 9 of your 15 were from that 2013 side. Knowing what we know now after Test 2, we've wrapped up another series win. Are you thinking the same? Or do you think 9 of 15?
Wow,
would you have
that
had
is
any
a
more
question,
of those lads
Rob.
in? Or?
Okay, so what did we win? We went Corpsiero,
Dan Sheehan,
Adam Jones,
Alan Wynne-Jones, Paul O'Connell, Van der Fleer, Warburton, Cornan, Gibson Park, Sexton, George North, Sione Tuipulotu, Jonathan Davies, James Law, and Lee Halfpenny.
Oh, wow.
I think there's certainly some of those lads that we picked.
Do you know what? This could be one for our final episode, just to tie in as well. We could maybe touch on this. I think this needs a bit more thought than just springing it on me here, Rob. There could, do you know what though? There could be 1 or 2 changes in that. There could be 1 or 2 changes off the back of last night in particular. So let's.
What you mean? You're going to bring Finn Russell in for Sexton? You're finally going to drop him like I suggested?
I don't know I couldn't have been more complimentary about Finn Russell. I couldn't have. He's up against a decent player, mate. He's not up against some Parks player, mate, either. But do you know what? It's an interesting one. Really interesting. I'd be interested. Why don't we do that for our next one? We give it some real thought and look at maybe how Test 3 pans out as well.
Yeah, I think we should revisit that one next week at our last video. So big thanks to Go.Compare for sponsoring this series. As Biggs just mentioned there, we've got 1 video left, which we're going to release next week. After the series done, we're going to review the series as a whole. Who impressed, maybe who didn't. Will Faz be Lions coach for the foreseeable future like Gatland was? Or will we see someone new take the reins in New Zealand in 2029? Do we reckon we're going to continue with this cycle? Are Australia going to maintain in the cycle? Are we going to bin them off? There's loads of questions for you there, Biggs.
Well done, Rob. Jet lag and everything. You've battled through that video, mate. Once again,
I haven't even whinged once. I haven't whinged
you
once
haven't.
about
You
jet
haven't
lag.
at all. You haven't at all, mate. Compare Rob from a week ago to today, and you're in a very different position, aren't we, producer Rob? But once again, thanks again to Go.Compare for sponsoring today's video, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.